I should remind you that I should remind. Welcome. Can you hear me now? Okay. I should remind you that Polyrhythm Church on the Jazz Series is made possible with major support of the Scott County Regional Authority, the Regional Development Authority, the Joyce and Tony Singh Family Foundation, Visionary Arts Photography and Media Center, Roman Accounting, Creative Landscaping, People's Heating and Air Conditioning, the Davis Entertainment Network, radio station KALA, and our own DJ Mr. Nail. I'd like to, I don't know if you all remember, there was a guy that used to be around here named Jimmy Jones, and he was a photographer, and he was, and he suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome. Okay. At any rate, Jimmy was a road dog of mine, and we'd go to the Chicago Jazz Festival all the time, and I would take him there and drop him off at the Harrison Street Hotel. And I would go, and he would go to the Velvet Lounge for the after set, and I would go to the Modern Jazz Showcase. We would, and all the way back, we'd argue about who went to the best thing. But Jimmy came, he gave me one day, he said, I want you to see something, and he gave me this piece of paper, and it said, when black children were killed in a bombing in Alabama in 1963, Coltrane wrote one of his most moving and emotional works, Alabama. Bill Cole, the significance of the piece is even greater than one recognizes that the melodic line of the piece was developed from the rhythmic inflections of a speech given by Dr. Martin Luther King. Much of the power of our freedom movement in the United States has come from this music. It has strengthened us with its powerful rhythms when courage began to fail. It has calmed us with its rich harmonies when spirits are down. And now jazz is exported to the world, for in the particular struggle of the Negro in America, there is something akin to the universal struggle of modern man. Everybody has the blues. Everybody longs for meaning. Everybody needs to love and be loved. Everybody needs to clap hands and be happy. Everybody longs for faith. In music, especially that broad category called jazz, there is a stepping stone toward all of these. This was a speech given by Martin Luther King Jr. in his opening address at the 1964 Berlin Jazz Festival. Okay.
Cool. That's great. Bravo.
Once again, Mike Conrad and the Iowa Jazz Composers Orchestra.
our lead trumpet. He plays the high notes, but he does so much more than that. And the soloist on that one, Dave Rezick on the trumpet. And on the soprano saxophone, Christopher Mertz. If that piece put you a little on edge, or there were some sounds that like kind of made your shoulders raise and go like, ugh, it was supposed to. There's supposed to be some tension in there. That's part one of the Fertile Soil Suite, and it's inspired by Iowa's unique position politically, historically as the first state to caucus, and all of the chaos we know that surrounds that season when everyone descends upon our state and cares about us for a short window of time and then goes back to ignoring us. So hopefully you heard some of the frenzy that we might associate with that. How many Iowa folks in here? Raise your hand. I know we're right on the border, and then what about Illinois side? All right, good. Yeah, we have a little bit of both. I was born in Illinois and grew up in Iowa, so I've got kind of both going on. And this is home for me. You know, I grew up in Bettendorf. It's always so nice to come back to town. I got to see my sister's new baby today. Got to go hang with my parents for a little bit, get a haircut from my mom. You know, makes me feel like I'm 10 years old again. And this band is like a family as well. Every time we get together and play, it just makes me so happy, and I'm so grateful for every one of these people here. We're going to carry on with something written by Chris Mertz, and the title, it shares a title with a David Foster Wallace novel. This one's called Infinite Jest, which I had heard him play with his band Equilateral back in the day, and he made a beautiful big band piece on this. You hear some of the clarinets and bass clarinets in the front row, and solos from Anthony Williams and Chris and Dave again. Infinite Jest. Infinite Jest. All right, I believe we've got a couple more for you. You know, Nate in his remarks was talking about the blues. I mean, everybody has the blues. And we're going to play a blues now by an Iowa-born musician who's now been in New York City for a long time. His name's Ryan Kaiser, and he plays lead trumpet in the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. Comes from Sioux City, Iowa. And the title of this is a little bit of a joke. It's a blues in the key of F, and it's hard. You know, it may cause the people practicing it to, I don't know, let out certain profanities or certain feelings about this music. The title of it is Effing Blues. Ryan Kaiser's Effing Blues, and it's arranged by Bob Washut. And let's see, for soloists on this one, we're kind of deciding in the moment what's going to happen here. Steve Grismore is going to play a guitar solo. He just found out. Jim Bunig is going to play an alto solo. Yes. And no trumpet takers. Dave Resnick, he's got it. We haven't heard enough from Dave. Never gets old. And Dave's got a lot of heavy lifting on this one, playing the melody as well. So we'll just give him even more to do back there. And we'll close it off with Simon Harding, how about on the baritone saxophone. All right? All right, I think we got it sorted out. So part of the deal with this band, you know, we're coming from all over. We got people coming from Des Moines, people from Iowa City. I live in Cedar Falls. Some of us are coming from up in that area, some even further up north in Forest City and all sorts of places. So we're putting a lot of miles on our car just to play some jazz music for you. But we love doing it. But part of the deal is we don't get to rehearse on a regular basis because we all live in different places. So you just heard our rehearsal there. So we hope you enjoy Effing Blues by Ryan Kaiser, arranged by Bob Washut. One, two, 1, 2, 3. All right. It's no fun if there's not a little risk involved. And that was, yeah, there was plenty of that going on there. Let's hear it for the soloists. Steve Grismore on the guitar, Jim Bunig on the alto saxophone, Dave Bresnick on the trumpet, and Simon Harding on the baritone saxophone. All right, do you want to hear one more? Okay, I mentioned that 4-part suite. We did part 3 on the first half. We opened up this set with part 1, and now we're going to do part 4. And it's called Flyover. And it's going to feature Steve Grismore, Robert Espy, and John Alabuni. John's got a trumpet solo on this one, Robert on alto, and Steve, of course, on guitar. And this explores some feelings of, you know, often being ignored or overlooked in the Midwest here. I think when people take a closer look at what's happening here, especially creatively, and they see musicians like these and organizations like Polyrhythms and some of the stuff that we can do here that people might not expect from us, that's sort of the vibe of this piece and the vibe of the band, really. Let's hear it one more time for the Iowa Jazz Composers Orchestra. We're so grateful to Nate and Polyrhythms. Keep an eye out on what they're doing. The Third Sunday Jazz Series, their festival in August. Follow them wherever they go, because they've always got great stuff happening and always been dear friends to us. I mentioned every time I play here how important it was to me as a young musician who was in love with jazz music to have a place to go where I could hear the music being played, and Polyrhythms provided that for me. I remember hearing Bill Frisell here, Willie Pickens, I mean, a number of world-class jazz musicians for a little nerd who's just like trying to play the trombone and learn how to like play blues and stuff. It was mind-blowing and really kind of changed my life. So I always make a point to bring up how important the work that we're doing is. All right, and thank you, of course, to all of you for being here, for coming out in the middle of a pandemic to hear us play. We can't thank you enough, and we hope you've enjoyed it tonight. We're going to send you off with this one, which is called Flyover.
Somebody in the band.
on the guitar. John Alabuni on the trumpet solo. And Robert Espy on the alto saxophone. Chris Jensen back there on the drums. and the entire band, the Iowa Jazz Composers Orchestra. Thank you, thank you.
Give it up, the Iowa Jazz Composers Orchestra. If that don't make one of us out to join a big band, I don't know what will. I'd like to tell you that February 20th, we have our third Sunday Jazz Series presents the Semenya McCord Quintet featuring the Semenya McCord Quartet featuring Frank Wilkins. Semenya McCord is a person from Guild that went to Boston and learned her trade under Max Roach and Max Roach. But at any rate, it's really kind of like East meets Midwest or something. You'll love what they do. Frank Wilkins is a female singer, pianist, and you'll love what they do. Please stop here. Thank you. The Iowa Jazz. Thank you very much.